If I buy a property through a Dubai holding company, does that actually give me more legal protection or just added complexity? The short answer is not really. I mean, it depends on the circumstances. Why you would be buying a property and putting it in the holding company. If it's just a property and there's no sort of other reasons or specific reasons why you need to put it in a corporate entity or in a legal entity, then there's no reason to put it in a holding company. And in that case, it could just be sort of adding additional layer of complexity, as you said. Yeah, so I guess that's the short of it. It really depends on your reasons, but otherwise, these days there's perhaps fewer reasons to do it than existed before. So in the past, for example, the sort of holding companies were popular or more common for the purposes of inheritance or distribution upon sort of at inheritance. So sometimes families would opt to own real estate and other assets in form of a holding company that was owned by another, let's say, foreign holding company for the purposes of inheritance, so that not to make or not to subject that particular asset to Sharia law in the UAE. So those were kind of reasons of when holding companies and for purposes of investing in real estate were more popular. These days, there are other ways to deal with inheritance and Sharia law. So, for example, in Abu Dhabi now there is an option for Muslims to have a civil will. So you no longer need to do this complicated scheme of ownership if you just opt for a will. Then also in the past, there were some other reasons just in terms of convenience. If you own multiple properties, you might have put those properties in the holding structure and sort of manage all those properties through this one holding company in terms of hiring service providers to help you manage those properties, for example. Then you could bill them out and invoice them from this holding company. And it was just going to provide it for a cleaner way of if you were doing it as a business. So these days, because of the taxes and the corporate taxes, what we have seen is a number of there's kind of for at least a temporary trend to move properties out of their holding companies, properties that is, and into personal names, so as to not be subject to the corporate or to the sort of to tax, the corporate tax, because whenever you have a holding company, that in short terms you have a corporation, and therefore that corporation is subject to corporate tax. So therefore you have to pay. So you have to have an obligation to register with the FTA, the Federal Tax Authority. You will have to submit your tax returns. You may not have to pay tax necessarily, because if you don't make enough revenue to go over the threshold, which is about $100,000, but you will still have the obligation to register and to submit tax returns. So whereas if you own real estate in your personal name, for the time being, the corporate tax law has carved anything to do with real estate out of the corporate law. So in short, if you own real estate in your individual name, your personal name, that you're not subject to corporate law. If you own real estate in some sort of a structure, including a holding structure, then you are subject to the corporate law. So there's your answer, depending on what your circumstances are. Some people actually may prefer to have it in a holding company, in a holding structure, to be able to optimize their tax obligations that they may be subject to in a different country. So to opt for the more favorable tax rate. And so it really depends on your circumstances.